Hello friends, I am Dr. Ashish Kadam. Now today we are into the third part of the video series on the button mushroom farming. In the video 1, we have discussed in detail about the health benefits of having the button mushroom in our diet. We also discussed the various products which we can manufacture from the button mushroom. In the second video, we discuss about the composting technology. Now today we are into the third part of the video. We were discussing the different processes which we do in the growing rooms. We have discussed in the part 2 video that pasteurization of the compost onwards, all processes we have to do in the sterile, clean, hygienic environment. This is very important aspect of the cultivation of the button mushroom in the high-tech farm. Now let us start with the third video. The, the first process is basically the spawn mixing process. The spawn mixing process is completed either in the spawn tunnel or in the growing room. Now in India, we are generally using the separate dedicated rooms for the mixing the spawn in the compost. Of course, we are using some machinery because we are taking the or we are using the bag based method for the cultivation of the button mushroom. But if you visit the farms in the Europe or in the Canada or in the Siberia or in the Ukraine, you will see that people are directly mixing the spawn with the compost in the growing rooms. Of course, they are using very sophisticated technology for spreading the compost over the beds, mixing the spawn in the compost. There are certain advantages you get. First advantage you get is that number of days required for filling the bags and shifting the bags into the growing room. So you requires lot of labor. Suppose if you are doing the farming, for example, per day of 1000 kgs of the mushrooms, or you have suppose a room for maybe 10,000 bags, then you will require tremendous labor, you will require tremendous manpower for shifting this filled 10 kg of the bags into the racks of level 5 or level 6. So lot of time goes into this. And another aspect is that you are transferring a lot of pathogens and bacteria because of the movement of the people into the growing room. And third advantage is that you can do this entire process in very less time. Fourth advantage you get that number of days you spend on transferring and filling the growing rooms also get reduced. And that is the reason the people in the developed countries where they have of course less people, less labor, they shift to the high-tech technology and they do this entire process through help of the machinery in the growing rooms. So just let us understand few statistics before going into the next processes. So 1 kg of the spores provides around 15 kg of the inoculated grains. Now manufacturing of this inoculated grain is a very sophisticated process. You need to have a separate infrastructure. We need to have a separate laboratory and skilled technician to handle this process. So cost of per kg of the spawn grain in the market, if you see, is around 90 rupees to 150 rupees. So if you are small growers or if you have one or two growing chambers, I would suggest to go for the procurement of spawn inoculated grains from third party sources available in the market. But if you have the big farms and if you are having production more than I would say 2 metric tons of the button mushroom per day, then of course it is economically viable to go for your own laboratory setup to manufacture your own inoculated grains. And of course you will get the benefit here. We will see that benefit in the next slide. So for 100 kg of the compost generally requires 500 grams to 750 grams of the spawn grains. And from this 100 kg of the compost, in India we generate or we get the yield of 12 to 16 kg of the button mushroom. But if you see in the Europe or in the Canada, people are getting around 25 to 28 kg of the button mushroom. So their production is almost double of what we are achieving what we are getting in India. The difference between their yield and our yield is because of few cares they have taken in the design of the plant and few cares they have taken in the administration operation of the plant. So in the video 2, last video, we have discussed few of these measures. In this video we will also understand the differences between their farming methods and our farming methods. If you implement that, or if you reduce this bridge, or if you reduce this gap, of course there is no difficulty in achieving their level of yield in our farm. Another difference or another factor you need to understand here is that we are using 100 kg of compost. Those people are also using the 100 kg of the compost. Their cost of the compost is the same like what we are paying for 100 kg of the compost. So out of that investment for 100 kg, we are getting, let us understand, 16 kg and they are getting 28 kg. Means they are getting 12 kg of button mushroom extra, which will convert into direct profit. So if you sell that 12 kg of the extra button mushroom, you will get, let us assume the rate 100 rupees. So 12 kg into rupees 100 means 1200 rupees you will get extra from 100 kg of compost. So you can convert that into how many cycles you have in a year at your farm and how much extra money you will get. So of course, if you look into the micro level planning, if you look into the economical aspect, you will find that the balance is always inclined for that extra investment into your capital goods to make the better plant and get the higher yield from your farm. So that is the reason people have opted for that in the Europe. They are not unwise, they are very smart, and that is why they are doing this. We need to understand and implement in our farms. Now, as I was saying that if you are buying the spawn from the third party laboratories, then you need to use the refrigerated spawn. You will not get the fresh spawn from the market. So advantage with the fresh spawn is that you will get the better growth and high yield over the refrigerated, stored, inoculated grains. That is the important advantage. So if you want to have edge, or if you are doing the cultivation on a very larger scale, or if you can afford the laboratory, then I would suggest you to use the fresh spawn and achieve the better results in your farm. So spawning is a very important process which has to be done, which has to be completed with a clean, sterile hand with very hygienic and healthy people. So we all know that the cultivation of the button mushroom started around 6 to 7 centuries back in the Europe. Those people started using the deserted, unused tunnels, which were basically the mines of different minerals. So if you see this picture, you will see this mine is of the limestone. So people use this limestone mine for the cultivation of the button mushroom. The reason is you are getting the right temperature and right relative humidity throughout the year without using any refrigeration machine. So what is the environment you require? So environment required is basically a temperature 18 to 23 degree of temperature, and you require relative humidity of 18 to 90%. So in India also we get these conditions without using the refrigerated machines. So when do you get that? We get that in the winter season. So if you look at the statistics, you will be surprised that around 60,000 to 70,000, 60 to 70,000 metric ton of the button mushroom is just happening within 3 to 4 months of the year. So you can understand that there is a oversupply of the button mushroom for very small period of 3 to 4 months of time. So you have very big demand and you have oversupply of the button mushroom. So you can understand what will happen with the rate you are getting, rate you are fetching for your product. So if you want to get advantage of this, you need to do the production throughout the year. And another factor you will understand here, that how much potential is there in the market. So if you can sell 60 to 70,000 metric ton production, which is 60 to 70% of our total production in the year, just within the 3 to 4 months, then balance 20 to 30,000 metric ton you are selling in rest 8 to 9 months of time. So in balance 8 to 9 months of the time also, you can do a sale of 60 to 70,000 metric ton. But now what we are doing, we are just selling 20 to 30,000 metric tons in balance 7 to 8 months. So in 3 months you are selling 60,000 metric tons, and in 8 months we are selling just 15 to 20,000 metric tons. So there is a huge imbalance is there. So if you want to take advantage of this huge imbalance, we can go for the all-round cultivation of the button mushroom using the sophisticated technology in our farm, and you can make better revenue out of it. So spawning is a very important aspect, which begins after the cooling off of the compost. We saw in the last video that compost after the preparation is pasteurized to kill the pathogens, bacteria and nematodes from it. After the pasteurization, the temperature of the compost is around 65 to 70 degrees centigrade. So you cannot directly use this compost for mixing with the spawn spores. We have to always ensure that the temperature and ammonia level in the compost is reduced. Then only the compost is fit for mixing with the spawn. So cooling off of the compost is a very important step after the steam pasteurization of the compost. So let us again understand few points which we have discussed so far. So mushroom compost is inoculated with the mushroom spawn that we have discussed, which requires again the laboratory. So producing mushroom spawn is a specialized process. So if you can afford, you can do the extra investment and hire the technician, and you can have your own laboratory setup. But if you have grower, if you are small growers, if you are small farm, always it is better to go for the third party supplied refrigerated inoculated grains, though there is a disadvantage with the refrigerated grains. Spawn can be produced at a farm site, or it can be produced from or purchased from the reliable source. Spawn is mixed with a pasteurized compost is in a clean and closed room. That also we have discussed. The room has to be very clean. It has to be very close. Otherwise, there are chances of infection because of outside bacteria or outside pollens. Flower pollens are floating in the air. They may mix with the compost, and then you will have the germination of the unrequired vegetative growth, or you may have the fungal growth, or you may have the weeds in your farm. So we have to do this entire process in the closed and clean rooms. So spawn compost is spread either over the bed, or we can fill in the bags of the 10 kg. Generally in India we are following the bag method of cultivation. In the overseas people are using the bed method, because bed method is an industrial method of the button mushroom farming. So after the spawning or after the mixing of the inoculated grain in the compost, we have to create a certain environment. So what is the environment required? Let us understand this from this slide. So for the vegetative growth of the mycelium, we have to maintain the compost temperature 23.8 degrees centigrade for a certain weeks, and we have to ensure that relative humidity of the room air is around 95%. So air has to be almost saturated with the moisture. And another important parameter we have to ensure is the carbon dioxide level, CO2 level, has to be around 12,000 to 18,000 ppm. So we are maintaining very high level of the CO2 in the farming room. So always we have to take care if you are entering into the farm room, because the CO2 level is very high. If you see the CO2 level in the natural atmosphere, it is just 400 ppm, and now you are maintaining 4,000 to 18,000 ppm. So there is a possibility of suffocation. There is a possibility of the suffocation. There is a possibility of having no oxygen in that environment. So you have to ensure that when people is going into that, he should have the breathing mask. He should have the oxygen cylinder filled with right quality, right quantity of oxygen with a breathing mask. There should be proper register for the people who have entered into the growing room, so that you can track how many people are operating or working in the growing room. So we have to, again I am repeating that we have to maintain certain environment, and this environment is very important. Now here one fine thing you can understand, that I am saying the compost temperature, I am not saying the room temperature. So compost temperature we have to maintain 23.8 degrees centigrade, and humidity of air has to be 95%, because the compost should not get dried out. If the humidity of the air is very less, then what will happen? The moisture will lose from the compost and the compost will become dry. Once the compost become dry, then the vegetative growth of the mycelium or the germination of the spores or the seeds will not happen in the compost. So we have to ensure that air is full of water vapor. That is called relative humidity, has to be 95%. Now here I am saying, again I am repeating, that we have to maintain temperature of the compost 23.8 degrees centigrade. So how will you ensure that the compost temperature or the temperature of the compost in the bag or in the bed is at 23.8 degrees centigrade? That you can ensure only through temperature sensors. So we have to have PT100 sensors. We have to have insertion type PT100 sensors, and which we can insert in the casing, in the compost, and from that you can read the value of the temperature. Now another factor again you have to remember here, that this temperature 23.8 degree we have to maintain not only for few hours, but we have to maintain for 2 to 3 weeks of time. So how will you maintain this temperature for 24/7 of the weeks? This is a very big challenge, and that is the reason you require the programmable logic controller. We require the PLC, or we require the microcontroller. So this microcontroller has its own brain. We have put the software, we have put the program into that microcontroller or in a PLC, which is basically reading the temperature values of the compost, which is basically seeing the temperature of the air, which is basically seeing the CO2 level and relative humidity of the air, and accordingly it is taking the control of the air handling unit. So we have the air handling unit which is supplied with either chilled water and with the warm water. So we have to supply both chilled water and warm water, and also we should have a provision for the injection of the steam in the air, or for the spraying of the mist in the flow of the air. So through that technology you can control very properly the compost temperature at 23.8 degrees centigrade. So your PLC will continuously monitor your room conditions, and accordingly it will modulate the walls of the air handling unit, it will modulate the dampers in the air handling unit, and it will ensure the right environment for the vegetative growth of mycelium. Now if one thing you understand here, which I am again repeating, this task you cannot expect through your people, through the labor. Man cannot monitor 24-hour this temperature. He cannot do this job very effectively. There has to be a controller in place. Then only you can do this. So During the vegetative growth of the mycelium, what happens? These mycelium grows, the hyphae forms, these hyphae fuses together. So we have small thin threads or hairs which fuses together, and they form the thick strings which are called basically the rhizomorphs. So these rhizomorphs is nothing but the I would say the small native pins or small native button mushrooms, because these rhizomorphs are basically converting later on down the time into the button mushroom. So if you minutely observe the formation of these thick strings or rhizomorphs, you can have a judgment of how much yield of the button mushroom you will have from each square meter of your cropping area. So you need to have the observation at such a small level, and accordingly if you are taking the care right from the first phase of the vegetative growth of the mycelium, then of course you will get the better. Because if you do not see the right growth here, then you can take right measures at this stage only, so that your entire cycle will not get wasted. Otherwise you will lose 50 to 60 days of the time, and you will lose the lot of money on this. Because if your one cycle failed, if your one cycle does not get the right production, then whatever the interest you have to pay on your borrowed money will be a burden for you, that you remember. So we have to have the right level of the control, we should have the right level of the observation at each stage of the process. So these are the small things I'm telling you, and we need to take the care. So again, all these things are possible if our people are trained. So we should have very trained and educated team at our disposal, which can continuously do this job for us at very professional level. So mycelium growth in the compost is depends on many factors. The first factor is the nutrients in the compost. Compost should have right quality of the carbon, right quality of the nitrogen, right quality of other minerals and nutrients, because these are the basically the food commodities for the growth of the mycelium. Then compost should be having a certain level of the moisture. If the compost is dry, then the growth will not be right. And another important parameter is the quality and purity of the spawn which you are procuring from a trusted source. So we should be using the right strain, right variety of the spawn culture for our compost. So these are the important cares we have to take. And another factor I am saying here, that the air which we are introducing into the room is basically for the removal of the heat. Here we are not introducing any fresh air, because we are maintaining very high level of the CO2. So if you are maintaining high level of CO2, you do not require to have the fresh air into the plant. If you want to reduce the CO2 level, or if you want to maintain the level very much close to the outside CO2 level, then you can supply the outside fresh air into the plant room. But for this vegetative growth, we do not require outside fresh air, because we have to maintain very high level of the CO2. And we are recirculating the same room air across the air handling unit, because only we have to take care of the cooling of the air. We don't want to control the CO2. It does not mean that we do not like to monitor the CO2 level. We want to monitor the CO2 level, because if the CO2 level increases above 18,000 to 19,000 ppm, then we may require to introduce in a certain proportion outside fresh air which has 400 ppm of CO2. So continuous monitoring of CO2 is a very important aspect. Now if you visit the high-tech farms in India, you will not see the CO2 sensors. People are not using this technology to their full extent. People are just putting small windows on the walls of their puff panel or insulated panel, and that small aperture, small windows, they uh, feel that will take care of maintaining the CO2 level. But we need to remember here that air exchange across room air and outside air will happen only if the room air has more pressure than the outside air. So just having a small window, it does not mean that your CO2 level will get maintained. So this is, I would say, misunderstanding that you are providing a small opening means you are taking care of CO2 level. That is not the correct science that we need to understand. So another important thing which you can understand from the air temperature here is that if your temperature of the air is increasing, or if your heating load or your cooling load on your cooling coil is increasing, means the metabolic reactions are happening in the mycelium. So whenever there is a growth of the mycelium, means there is a metabolic process is happening, and metabolic process is basically a heat generating process. It is like an exothermic process. So their chemical reaction is happening, their biological reaction is happening, and that is why the compost temperature is increasing. So that is I would say the first signal you are getting that you are having the right quality of the compost, you have the right quality of the spawn, and you have the right environment. And that is why from this you can get a feel that all your steps so far are at are in the right direction. So over a period of 2 to 3 weeks of time of spawn running into the compost, we requires to spray around 20 to 25 liters of water over each square meter of cropping area, because we require moisture. Moisture in the compost is very important. So we have to uniformly spray the water through a sprinklers. So uniformity is very important. So we have to use the right pressure for the water sprinklers. So once we have the vegetative growth of the mycelium, once we have the picture of white milkish threads which has engulfed the entire compost, then you can begin the second process, which is called casing. So in the casing, what we are doing, we are applying basically a top dressing to the compost. So it is nothing but a cloth. So we are laying the cloth on the compost. So what are the benefits of compost? So benefit of the compost is it acts as a water reservoir. It acts as a place. It provides the anchorage where rhizomes forms. So that this is a very important benefit of the casing. So if you do not apply casing, then vegetative growth will not happen, and then you will not have the mushrooms. So casing has a very important role. So whatever casing you are applying, it has to be a pasteurized. So we have seen that all the processes we are doing after the pasteurization of the compost have to be in the clean environment, have to be completed in the sterile environment. So whatever material you are using, whatever ingredients are using, whatever pesticides using, whatever water quality you are using, or the people who are entering, they have to be sterilized. Their clothes have to be sterilized, and then they should enter. So casing, which is now coming into this cropping area, it has to be ensured that it is free of all insects and pathogens. So we have to ensure that it is pasteurized. So we are generally using two methods of pasteurization. The first method is the steam pasteurization. In the steam pasteurization, what we do, we maintain the temperature of the casing for 6 to 7 hours within a range of 60 to 70 degrees centigrade, 60 to 65 degrees centigrade. So if you do not have this technology, or if you do not have a setup, for example, you will require boiler, you will require room, then you can go for the chemical pasteurization. So a chemical pasteurization is a very simple process where we use the chemicals like formalin, which has basically a 40% formaldehyde. So you can use this formalin solution for the chemical pasteurization. So we have to do certain fumigations, and certain steps are there for the completing this chemical pasteurization. So we will not discuss this in detail here, but we need to remember that pasteurization of the casing is a very important aspect of this step number 2. So what are the different casing materials used in different countries? So if you go to the Denmark, people are using the peat and chalk because it is naturally available in ample quantity and at a cheap rate in the Denmark. If you go to the India, we are using the farmyard manure and we are using the loam soil, or sometimes we are using the spent compost of the mushroom plant, which is mixed with the calcium carbonate. If you go to the UK, people are using the moss peat. If you are in the US, people are using the peat, chalk, or local subsoil. So people are experimenting or using the different casing materials. So you can see this casing material. This is a farmyard manure. So this is basically a uh, organic waste of the farmyard, which is a decomposed, completely decomposed, and then it is a screen. So that is why you can see very small grains. There are no big chopped cuts or the lumps in this. It is just very fine, dry, delicate, like the tea leaves. It's just like a tea leaves you can see in this picture. So it should be of that quality. You just imagine the tea, granular tea. So it is of that quality. So that kind of uniformity should be there in the farmyard manure. Then this is a vermicompost. Third is we can use the spent mushroom compost. So spent mushroom compost is basically a it is basically a waste product of the mushroom plant. So after the cultivation, after the harvesting, we have huge quantity of the compost, and which we are basically removing from the growing areas, and we are either we are selling it or we are using it for the filling. So you can use this material also for the as a casing material. But again here we have to take a certain care, because whatever the material you get, whatever the spent compost you get from the farm, it has to be matured for a certain period. So generally people mature it for 1 to 2 years of the time, and then they use as a casing material, because the pH has to be neutralized from the compost. That is very important aspect of the casing material. That is very important, I would say, characteristics of the casing material. So we have to ensure that. So here you can see a business. So if you are having a big farm, or you are getting thousands of metric tons of the compost from your compost farms, then you can convert that spent mushroom compost into beautiful, good fertilizer, and which you can market through a beautiful brand name, through beautiful packing, and through a beautiful ways of marketing. We have to here market, we have to tell the positive aspects of this waste mushroom compost, that it is full of nutrients, it is a very good source of fertilizer, so that farmers can use it for their gardens and for their farms, and you can get very good price for it, maybe from 10 rupees to 12 rupees per kg. If you are doing very ample production, and if there are few buyers only, then the rate may go down to even 5 to 6 rupees per kg. But this is a value added product for you. Even we can use this product for the export to different countries. There are many countries which are buying this compost waste and they are using it in their farms. So you can use this even for the export. So you have to use your all marketing skills, and you have to ensure that you can utilize this material and you can generate additional revenue from your compost. So coming back to the casing material, so this is the coconut coil pith. Now this coconut coil pith is just as name says, it comes from the coconut. So generally you will get huge quantity of this from the manufacturers, in the South India. So if you look at this picture, you will see that this is a block. So this is a coir pith block of weight 5 kg. You also get this block in a 10 kg. So you can see these properties. So its compression ratio is 5:1. Moisture content is less than 20%. So if you have more moisture, then you will be buying the water as good as you are buying the water. So you have to ensure that when you are buying, it should be very dry so that you will get more quantity of the coconut coir pith. Its electric conductivity is less than zero point 0.5. Expanded volume is around 13 to 14 liters per kg, and in one pallet you will get around 210 to 220 blocks. So if you are bringing in one full container of 40 feet, then you will get 20 pallets, and 20 pallets into 220 blocks means you will get around 4000 to 4400 blocks in one container. So you can use this coconut coil, and basically this is the ideal material, I would say. People are preferring in India as a casing material for their farm. So quality of the casing material is depends on many factors. So we have to judge the casing material by using these 6 parameters. The first parameter is that it should have very low density. It should be light in weight. The texture should be soft. Porosity should be high, because casing material should allow the exchange of air between the room air with the compost. If the casing material is very hard and dense, then it will not allow the flow of air across the casing to the compost. So for the growth of the mycelium, for the vegetative growth of the mycelium, or for the fructification of the mycelium, there has to be a continuous supply of oxygen to the compost, and that will happen only if compost casing is allowing the flow of air to the bottom of it. And that is why porosity is very important parameter. Then fourth is high water holding capacity. It should not get dried, it should hold the water, because water is very important parameter for the growth of the mushroom. And pH should be 7 to 7.5, means it should be a neutral material. Conductivity should be very low, 400 to 600 micro ohm. So if you apply these 6 parameters and select the right material and mix with right ingredients, then you will have the very ideal casing material for your farm. Now again we are repeating the same slide which we have discussed few minutes back, that for the vegetative growth we require certain environment. We require CO2 level around 12,000 to 18,000 ppm, which is very high level, and to maintain that very high level of CO2 you need not require to take fresh outside air into a tube. But if your CO2 level, if it is going above 18,000 or 19,000 ppm, then you may require to introduce fresh air into the room. So after the vegetative growth of the mycelium has happened in the compost, we have applied the casing material on the, we have spread the casing material on the compost. So after this phase, the second phase is basically a pinning phase. It is basically a pinning phase. So what happens in the pinning phase? So we have seen in the last slide that we have now the rhizomorphs. We have small knots which are formed because of the fusion of small thin threads of the mycelium. Now these rhizomorphs further grow and they form the mushroom primordia. So primordia is basically small heads. They are basically pins. They are basically small buttons, and these pins later on develops and converts into the button. So the process of converting these rhizomorphs or thick threads into the pins or the primordia is basically initiated by providing a thermal shock to the crop. So what we do? So we have seen that we were maintaining compost temperature 23.8 degrees centigrade. We were maintaining the room temperature between 22 to 25 degrees centigrade. We were maintaining the very high humidity. We were maintaining the very high CO2 level of 10,000 to 20,000 ppm. Now we are going for the second phase where we have to allow the fructification to happen in the compost. We have to allow, we have to instigate the formation of the primordia in the compost, and that will initiate only if you are suddenly or in a certain steps reducing the temperature, humidity and carbon dioxide level. So here you have to ensure that the air velocity has to be very high, the evaporation has to be very high, because if water is getting deposited, if the water is getting deposited on the pins, then there is a accumulation, there is a collection, there is a bacterial problem to the pins. So we have to ensure that when you are going for the fructing process, the air velocity has also to be increased over the bags, over the beds, and we have to measure that air velocity. The air velocity has to be in certain range, 0.4 to 0.6 meter per second, and that has to be uniform over the all thousands of bags in your growing rooms. Have you seen people are measuring air velocity in the growing rooms? I have not seen. People are not controlling these parameters. They are putting small dx type AHU, which is not basically a right solution for the harvesting or for the cultivation of the button mushroom, but people are using this technology without understanding the problems with it. We will see that in the next video, but you remember that you can only control the temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide and air velocity through industrial air handling unit, which is working on the circulation of chilled water and hot water, and having the mixing plenum, or having the fresh air damper, having the return air damper, having the modulation walls for the control of water and the control of hot water through the microcontroller and a PLC. So if you have this technology, then only you can control these parameters. So if you control all these parameters simultaneously, then only you will be able to cover a gap of 10 to 12 kg of extra production and achieve the target of the yield what the people are getting in the Europe or in the Canada or in other parts of the world. So those people are basically controlling temperature, humidity, CO2 level, air velocity, evaporation rate, oxygen level, so many parameters. And that is the difference I am saying again. So compost temperature should be lowered 2 degree Fahrenheit. 2 degree Fahrenheit means 1.5 degree per day per 24 hours until you see the small mushroom pins are formed in the compost. So if you have the right environment, or if you are applying the thermal shock, then only the fructification will happen. So if you are having higher evaporation, I am repeating, high evaporation for 2 to 3 days induce the formation of small fructing structure called fin heads. High evaporation means we are allowing little bit drying of the compost. So if you allow higher evaporation of water from the compost, then compost will get little bit dried, and that will help us to induce the fructing structure or fructification, because the heat is required for the reproduction, or heat is required for the formation of the pins, and that only you can achieve through the high evaporation of the water. Means air has to absorb the water from the compost, and air will absorb water from the compost only if air is moving uniformly over the beds or the bags in the growing rooms. So you have to ensure that air is reaching to each and every bag in the room. If your only few bags in the room are getting air, then you will not get uniform yield for every bag. you will not get the higher yield for every bag. So uniformity of circulation of air is very important. So from this picture you can see here, if you look at this picture you can see this, these are all basically small pins. These are all small pins, and these small pins are formed from the thick strands, thick rhizomorphs. So there are small hyphae, like you can see this picture. There are small hyphae, there are small thin threads, and these thin threads, they fuses together, they meets together and form the rhizomorphs. They form the thick threads, and these thick threads converts into the pins. So you can see these pins, and that is called the fructification. So this fructification to happen, we have to allow drying of the compost a little bit. We have to reduce the temperature from present 23 to 22 to 23 degrees centigrade to the 16 to 17 degrees centigrade. So we have to control so many parameters at the same time. So do you expect that you can do this process through the manual intervention for a 24/7 period of time of the day? It is not possible. So you can see this picture. So here you can see the growth of the mycelium. You can see this is a bed method of the farming of the mushroom. This is the bed method of farming the mushroom, and you can see this milky white mycelium has spread uniformly over this. Now these small thin threads, you can see this, now they are converted into pins. So these are basically the fruits, and now these fruits are growing in a size because right environment is created around it, and now they are converted into the small button mushroom. So this is a process. So this is a process the nature is following to reach to this level. So air temperature, air humidity has a very huge impact on the number of buds or pins you form per square meter of area of your compost. So more pins means you have the low size mushrooms. If you are getting less pins means you have the big size mushrooms, but you will have very few numbers. So we have to have a balance of rate of evaporation of water from the compost. There should be proper air temperature, there should be right humidity, there should be right oxygen level, there should be right CO2 level. Then only you can decide the quantity and quality of the pins. So if you have more pins per square meter area means you will have many low size mushrooms. People buy not the big size mushrooms. They want 30 to 40, maximum 45 millimeter size mushrooms. So if you want to produce the right quality of the mushrooms, we should have the more number of pins. If you are having less number of pins means small pins means you are providing more surface area, you are providing more space for each pin, and because of that the mushroom, these pins will grow in very big size. So if you are getting 50 mm 60 mm size mushrooms at the end of the process, then naturally you will not get even better rate. Your customer will not get attracted to your mushroom. So you have to produce the mushroom of right size, of right quality, of right color. It should be free of dirt, it should be free of any brown, black spots, green spots, and that is what customer is asking for, customer is paying for. So we have to satisfy the customer by providing right quality of the mushroom. So we have to maintain these right conditions in the growing room, and that is basically art. This is basically a recipe. This is basically you have to learn through your experiences, and that is why I was telling in the last video that we should have standard operating procedure in a place. We should have the data monitoring continuously in place. We should have the analysis of the data continuously in place. If you do this for every cycle. If you observe what are the impacts of variations, you said last time 22 degree, this time you are maintaining 23, last time you maintain 80, this time you are maintaining 90. What has happened? What was the impact of that change on your yield, quality of the mushroom? So if you are continuously monitoring, experimenting, then you will get the right judgment, you will get the right recipe, you will get the right formula. So every grower has his own formula. Every grower formula is a top secret. People will not share because today's life is very professional. Industry is a professional. So if I want to get better rate for my farm, then I have to protect my formula. I should not share my formula. I should not share my technology with outsider. But you have to develop that. And in India, basically, we are missing on that. We need to develop that attitude. Then you see that there is a big growth potential. There is a very big potential even for your professional development, for your monetary development. And you will be having a proud to have a very successful farm in place. So let us go further. So pinning, so pins develops, small buds develops when carbon dioxide content of room air is lower to 0.08%. 0.08% it means 800 ppm or lower, depending on the variety or the strain you are using of the spawn. So there are, I'm again repeating one point again here, very important point, that what is the CO2 level, what is the temperature level, what is the humidity level, what is the quality of compost required is different for each variety of spawn. So if you are getting X spawn, then you should ask for that seller of the spawn what is the humidity required, what is the temperature required, what is the CO2 level required, so that I will get a better yield from that spawn. So you have to ask this. And I see that people are missing. In fact, people are not asking this. And even I have seen that the sellers or the of these inoculated grains, they themselves are not having the idea of what is the CO2 level, what is the oxygen level, what is the air level, what is the air velocity is ideal to get the better production from the my seeds. So this is again, I would say, an educational gap. This is, I would say, again the gap between the seller and buyer of the spores. So pin develops when we are providing a thermal shock, that we have discussed. Again, I am repeating the same things. So in the first phase we have discussed that we require temperature 22 to 23 degrees centigrade. When we wanted to start the pinning, we reduce the temperature to 15 to 16 degrees centigrade. We reduce the relative humidity, we reduce the CO2 level, so that pinning will start. And again we discussed that we need to maintain a certain air velocity because we have to allow the evaporation of water from the compost. So what is the air velocity required? The air velocity is required 0.2 to 0.5 meter per second over the beds or the bags. So outside air has a carbon dioxide content of 400 ppm. This we have seen in the last slide. I discussed about this. So what is the CO2 level we require during this stage in the growing room? Around 800 ppm. So we have to maintain almost double of CO2 level of the outside fresh air during this phase of the growing. So harvester mushrooms then appear after around 18 to 20 days after the casing. So we have seen that we do the spawn mixing on the day 1. After that 3 weeks we do the we have the vegetative growth, we apply the casing, and then around another 18 to 21 days goes for the formation of the pins and get the right quality of the button mushrooms, and then you get the first flush. So this is a process. We'll discuss this process in very detail in our next video, and you will see that how many cycles you can manage in a year to have the right volume of the production and right revenue from it. So we'll see that also in detail in my next video. So again I am repeating the same thing, that if you measure, then only you can control. So if you have the right quality of the sensors, if you have the right number of sensors, or if you have sensors at the right place, and if you have again the software or the brain which is continuously reading the values and accordingly setting the conditions, then only you can get or you can achieve the production what the people in other countries are achieving. So that is why again I am repeating that gap, technological gap, or what we are doing at farm and what other people are doing in the outside of countries, the gap is very small. The gap is only about the technology. Gap is about the care those people are taking. So if you look professionally, then of course you will have that level of yield from your farm. So here again I am repeating the same things which we have discussed. So timing of the fresh air introduction is very important. So we have seen that thermal shock is very important. If you provide thermal shock to rhizomorphs, then they only converts into pins. They will convert into the buds. But at what time, at what stage you have to reduce the CO2 level, we have to reduce the temperature, we have to allow the evaporation of water to take place from the compost. That is basically will come through experience. That is basically art. So though you know science, it does not mean you will have success. You have to experiment, you have to observe, you have to recheck, you have to note down, and again you have to see that happens every cycle, and then you will get the judgment at what time you have to start reducing the temperature. Then only you will land at right place. It is just like you are flying the aircraft. So the way the pilot is taking a decision to take down the aircraft, so he knows at what time, at what altitude he has to reach, then only he can land the aircraft at the right time on the port. On the same way, you have to develop the skills so that you can end up in having very high volume of production, very high yield of button mushroom from your farm. So this is just a small example I am giving so that you can understand and get the clarity on this particular point. So generally it is best to ventilate as little as possible until the mycelium has begun to show at surface of the casing, and to stop watering at the time when pin initials are forming. So we have seen that during the first vegetative growth we are applying very large quantity of water, 20 to 25 liters of water we have to apply per square meter. But once you start, then we have to reduce watering, and we also ensure little bit ventilation. So carbon dioxide is lowered too early by airing too soon. The mycelium stops growing through the casing and mushrooms initial form below the surface of the casing. So we have seen that we are applying casing, and now we have to decide where to grow the mushroom, whether you want the mushroom below the casing, or you want the mushroom above the casing, or you want the mushroom in between of the casing. So at what time you are applying this thermal shock, at what time you are opening your fresh air damper in ARHU, in the air handling unit, that will decide where these buds will form in the casing. So that you will get a feel. So in my last cycle I got the buds pins below casing because I started ventilating my rooms little early. Now this time in second cycle what I will do, I will delay that process by maybe another few hours, or maybe another day. And this is how you can adjust, and this is how you can learn, and then you can practice, you can validate, and then you will be a better experience grower. So as such, mushroom continue to grow. They push through the casing and are dirty at the harvest time. So if you are growing below the casing, what will happen? They will be dirty. It will be very difficult to remove the and harvest the button mushrooms from the casing if they are growing below the casing, and then they will be dirty, they will be black, and then you will not get the right price for that. People will not buy it. And I have seen, when I am going in the market, when I see the packet, I get a judgment, and I feel and I understand from it. So where those button mushrooms have harvested, or where those button mushrooms have grown. So if those are black, if there are brown spots are there, or if these are coming under the casing or in between of the casing, then bacterial blotch is also very high. Then you will lose the production, you will lose the revenue, you will lose the profit, and then you may fail in the business. So mushroom growing is an art, and you have to develop that art. You have to fine tune your art, fine tune your judgment, experiments, only through the experiments. So if you too little moisture can result in mushrooms forming below the surface of the casing. So we have seen, if you are allowing ventilation early, mushrooms will or birds will form below the casing. If there is too little moisture in the compost, again the mushrooms will form below the surface of the casing. So there has to be little right quality of right quantity of the mushroom, right level of the moisture in the compost. So pinning affects both potential yield and quality of a crop, and is a significant step in the production cycle. So it is a very important step in your production cycle. So you have to allow the thermal shock at right place at right time, then only you will get mushrooms at right locations over the surface of the casing. Otherwise they will grow below the casing, and then you will not get good price. So how you will do this? If you have a technology, if you have the right design in place, if you have the right ducting, if you have supplying the air at right places. Just having a ducting means you are not supplying or not having a right circulation of the air. The ducting has to be designed in a proper way. The air velocity in the duct, the air velocity at the hole of the duct, or from where the air is coming out of the duct, has to be at right velocity, at right pressure. Then only it will reach, it will pass through the number of shelves, and you will have the right optimum velocity even at the bottom of the shelf. Otherwise you are only maybe mid rows or maybe the top shelves of your growing room will be receiving the right quality of the air. But those bags at the bottom of the shelf, at the corner of the shelf, or at the wall sides of the your growing room, they will not get, and then you will not have the uniform uniform quality of the button mushroom in your growing room. So we have to take lot of care of all of these points. So we will now into the next phase, that growing of these small buds, pins into the button. So pin head develops over a period of 1 week into full sized mushrooms. Once the pin head forms, they takes 1 week of time to develop into the full size mushrooms. The evaporation process should be reduced, which we have reduced even in the last phase of the fructification. Too low evaporation process, then browning and pitting of the cap surface will happen. If the evaporation rate is very high, then moisture will go out of the button skin and water stress will develop, drying will happen, scaling will happen, because you have to control the evaporation process here, because you are continuously watering your button mushroom, you are continuously watering the pin heads, you are continuously watering the crops. So water get deposited on the caps, water get deposited on the pin heads, water get deposited on the buds. So if this water is not getting dried up, then there is a formation of bacterial blotch, or there is a pitting of the cap surface will take place, and then and then the cap surface or bottom surface will not be uniform, and it will not have that level of shininess. So we have to ensure that. So we have to ensure what product you want. So again, this is judgment, and that judgment only you will have if you are controlling it, and controlling is only possible if you have that level of design in a place in your growing room. So again, I am saying that we need to have right quality of sensors, we should have right quality of systems which is controlling these sensors and air handling unit, and then you can experiment it with this, and accordingly you can set your farm at right set points, and then you can get better production. And that is what people are not doing, and that is why they are ending up in a problem in while handling the crop in the button mushroom farming. And this is, I would say, the biggest stumble, this is the biggest hard rock. So again I am repeating, so you will be able to control if you have sensors in the cropping room. So you have to control in the first phase we have seen, you have to control CO2 level, you have to control air velocity, you have to see compost temperature. In the second part we have to reduce those parameters. In the third phase again we have to control the evaporation process. So we have to control so many parameters per phase of the crop. So for every phase of the crop you require a different environment, you require certain different conditions. So if you do not have those controls, then you will not have those different environments, and then naturally you will see the impact on your production quantity as well as quality. So you see this impact here, so you see the pictures, so you see the bacterial blotch. So these are basically the diseases. Here the surface is brown, surface is not shiny, you see the pitting on the surfaces, then you can see the dirt because those have grown in the casing material. So if you are going and selling this level of quality of products in the market, then people will hesitate to buy this level of products. So your button mushroom should be uniform in size, uniform in shape, it should have smooth surface, it should have shiny surface, it should be free of any pits, it should be uniform white in color, because this is a white button mushroom, so it should be white button, it should be like white button. If you are giving spots on it, then people may not buy it. Now in India, still the buyers are not educated to that level. They do not know what is the right quality of the mushroom. But down the time, people will get educated, people will understand, they need to buy that level. Once they understand those parameters, then we will be forced to cultivate that quality of the button. Otherwise, you will not see any buyer for your product. So these are the different diseases. So today again we are not going to discuss in detail about this, but if you want more information, we can interact on the WhatsApp, we can discuss the help you want, and certainly we can solve it. So I will not take much more time here to discuss this. My WhatsApp number is at the bottom of each slide. You can contact us, we can discuss, you can take the advice from us or from experts in the field, and you can have the right technology and right farming methods. So these are the diseases, like you have dry bubble, wet bubble, cinnamon mold, inky caps. These are the different. And you again you see the management. So infected casing layer. You have to properly sterilize the casing with right chemicals. So these are the methods are given. So if you are taking those cares, or if you have taken those cares right at the pasteurization of the casing, pasteurization of the compost, pasteurization of the room, then hygiene of the people who are entering into the room, people are wearing the hand gloves, masks, you are using the right quality of the water in your farm, then of course the bacterial blotch or bacterial diseases or the fungal growth will be very less, and you will have little infections, and then you will be very much safe, and you will get better revenue, better profit. So these are the diseases: brown plaster mold, false truffle disease, green mold, cobweb. Again, if you see this truffle disease is because of the high temperature. So if there is a temperature 26 to 27 degrees centigrade in the spawn run or after casing, if these temperatures are very high, then you will get this disease. So you have to maintain these temperatures, and not only this, you have to maintain this temperature throughout all bags, throughout all shelves in your bag, throughout entire bed. So this is very important things. So success mantra is develop, vary and control the microclimate around each square meter of cropping area through accurate mapping of parameters. Accurate mapping is very important. If you visit the farms in the foreign countries, you will see the huge many of sensors on the entire bed. They are measuring air velocity, compost temperature, CO2 level, oxygen level at the level of or at the height of the button mushroom, just 1 or 2 centimeters above the casing surface. They are measuring this, not in the level of your air handling unit, not at the level of ceiling. They are measuring at each level of the bed. They are measuring at each bag, and that is the reason I am saying here microclimate. So you have to create a microclimate uniformly for each and every button mushroom. We have to develop that microclimate, and we have to vary, control as per their growth phase. We have to vary and control. We have to change that microclimate as per the growth, as per the phase of growth of that particular crop. That is very important. So what are parameters we have to vary? Air temperature, air humidity, air velocity, CO2 level, compost temperature. We have to use the right quality of the compost which is rich with nutrients and minerals, so which is suggested. Laboratory analysis of the compost, then moisture level in the compost. We should have the very pure quality spawns from the trusted source. We should not use the refrigerated spawns. We should try to have our own fresh spawns in the field. Then hygiene in the pasteurization tunnels, spawning and growing areas, hygiene of the people. So if you are maintaining all these cares, then you will have the success. You will get the success. You will not fail in this business. People will give the advance orders for buying your product. And that is what the purpose of my video, to educate and develop the right farms, right technologies, and make people successful in this business. So next phase is cropping. So we have seen so far that we have got the right quality of the button mushrooms of size 40 to 50 mm, whitish, uniform in color, uniform in texture, shining, and we have got very good. You can see this picture also. You can see this picture. All are uniform. No birds, no button mushrooms are developed under the casing or in the compost. All are above the casing at same level, and you can see the flush. Now this is a little bit of bigger size. we have to ensure that you get as many as of uniform size. That is also again an art. So crop. So here now we are going for the next phase. That is a cropping phase. Cropping phase means we have to go for now harvesting. We have to remove these button mushrooms. So cropping happens in a rhythmic cycle. So there is a particular pattern we have to maintain when we are going for the harvesting of the button mushroom. This is also very interesting thing. So cropping season lasts for 3 to 5 days, and that is called one flush. So after each flush there is a gap of few days. So in India we consider it as a 5 to 7 days. So we have to give a gap of 5 to 7 days, and after again 5 to 7 days we get the second flush. So air temperature during cropping should be between 14 to 17 degrees centigrade for the good result. So cropping is nothing but the harvesting of the button mushroom. Now we have got the right quality of the button mushroom. Now we have to remove those. We have to harvest button mushroom, and now we have to send it for the packing. So that season is called basically a flush. So you get the 4-5 flushes. You get the and then you can use that for the packing. So again we will repeat. So we have got these gills or basidia. We form the spores. The spores germinate in the compost because we are creating a right environment. Then hyphae meets, and they forms the hyphal knots. You can see this mycelium. So till mycelium we have to maintain these conditions. 10,000 to 18,000 ppm of CO2, temperature, RH, evaporation has to be low. Once you reach this stage, and we are going now into the process of fructification, pinning, then we have to reduce these parameters, and you can see these parameters. So there are 2 or 3 phases are there environmental wise, basis of 2 or 3 phases of the growth, or 2 or 3 phases of the life cycle of this button mushroom. So we have to identify those phases, and at right time, we have to take right decisions, and then only you can get right quality of the button mushrooms. So CO2 management is very important aspect. We have discussed that. Just will again summarize this point. So during spawn run phase, CO2 level is maintained 10,000 to 18,000 ppm. During pinning and cropping phase, we have to maintain CO2 level around 800 ppm, means we are reducing the CO2 level from spawn run phase by introducing the ventilated fresh air from outside through the air handling unit. So we are opening the fresh air damper. So fresh air damper should have a modulator controller. There should be modulating motor. Then only you can decide what quantity of fresh air to take. Otherwise, if you allow more fresh air quantity, then this CO2 level may drop even below 800 ppm, and then it is also not good for your farm. Even if you are having CO2 level more than 18,000, that is also not good for the right quality of the button mushroom. So if high CO2 level is maintained during cropping, mushrooms will have a longer stems, loose quality, or will not increase in weight. Even weight is also a parameter which is governed by the CO2 level, that you can understand from this. So during the cropping phase, so when we are harvesting, again we have to maintain very low level of CO2. If you maintain high CO2, or if the CO2 level is not uniform, CO2 level is very low at air handling unit where it is supplying the air, or in other corners which are very long or away from the air handling units where fresh air is not reaching because of incorrect design of the air handling unit, incorrect throw of the air from the ducting system, incorrect air velocities at the ducting system, or if improperly arrange the shelves and the bags, if there are no proper gaps between the shelves, then also you will have different levels of CO2s in different rooms, and even in the same room, and then you will have a problem. So CO2 management is very important, but again if you measure, then you can control. So this is American design. Now just come to the growing room. So we have growing rooms. We have 4 shelves in this picture. Per shelf you can see how many beds are there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 beds are there. We are not allowing more than 6 beds, but we have seen in India and in some developing countries people are having 8, 9, 10 shelves because they have impression that if they have more beds means they will have more production, but that is not true. We should have proper number of shelves only so that proper circulation of air will happen. So we have to ensure that you are creating a right microclimate for each and every shelf in this picture. Sometimes you can see this is a duct from where the air is supplying. So only these shelves which are very much adjacent close to the air handling unit, they are receiving air, they are receiving and they are having this microclimate. But the shelves which are at the bottom of this, they will not have, because the air velocity or this design of this growing room is not proper. So designing of the room is very important aspect. So please ensure there is uniform airflow, no dead pockets having air velocity 0. Sometimes these are the areas where velocity will be 0 and these are basically a dead pockets. If these are the dead pockets created, then you will see the very less growth or less yield from these shelves. So there should be uniform CO2 level, uniform temperature also should be uniform. We have seen that temperatures in the areas or in the spaces close to air handling unit and ducting are at right level, but the areas which are very much away from the ducts are maybe 2 or 3 degree or 4 degree even more than or lower than what we are expecting. So we have to ensure that there is a uniform temperature throughout your growing rooms. The moisture level also should be uniform in the air. So these cares you can take only if you have the right design in a place. So these are the small factors which are basically impacting the yield of your farm. So this is Irish design. This is also very beautiful design, very much validated design. This design is also giving very good yield in the Europe. So people are using this yield technology. So this is the Irish design. So this is last phase. So we have now seen different phases of growth of the button mushroom. We have seen about the cropping, we have seen about the harvesting, and now the pasteurization of the growing rooms, because we have completed all the flushes and now henceforth we will not get that level of yield. So we need to stop the harvesting. So after that we have to remove all the bags, we have to remove all the compost, we have to clean all the shelves, we have to clean the air handling unit, we have to open the ducts, we have to open the fabrics of the ducts. Everything should be thoroughly cleaned with pressurized cold water and hot water. So there has to be a proper drainage system in the growing room so that water will not get collected, water will not form ponds, and there will not be a bacterial growth. So the surface of your growing room, the flooring of your growing room has to have certain slope so that water will not get deposited, water will not get accumulated, and it will create a problem for the next cycle. So cleaning of the entire thorough cleaning of the pasteurization of the growing room is very important. So growing room should be closed off and room should be pasteurized with steam. So after thorough clean with jet of cold water and hot water, we have to close the room completely. We have to close the dampers of the air handling unit, and then we have to supply the steam at a temperature 65 to 70 degrees centigrade, so that all the bacteria, pathogens of the last cycle will get completely killed, completely burnt, so that they will not get again into the next cycle, and your next cycle will also will not get impacted or affected because of the stresses of the germs of the last cycle. So destroy all pest, bacteria, viral infection, molds, minimize the likelihood of infesting the next crop. So that is the reason we go for the pasteurization with the steam. So we have to supply enough steam, and we have to maintain uniform temperature of the growing room at 65 and 70 degrees centigrade, and that also we have to monitor continuously through your controlling system, your measurement system. So again, that you can do through even through PLC based SCADA system or microcontroller system. So you can have a centralized one monitoring or control room, where you will have big 29-inch screen or computer desktop, or maybe TV, and there you can see all the rooms at one place, and you can see what is the going on between different rooms. And even you can have the cameras, and through that you can do the surveilling of the people who are working, and even you can see your product through zooming in and zooming out of the camera feature. So even you're not required to open the room frequently and disturb the environment. So that is also another problem I have observed, that people are frequently opening the doors of the growing rooms, and they are disturbing the environment. So we have to ensure uniform undisturbed environment, and that is another reason people are promoting the technology. People are suggesting to go for the higher level of technology implementation in the mushroom farming. So you can ensure the temperature 65 to 70 degrees centigrade for the pasteurization through your centralized monitoring station, that is called SCADA room. So hygiene is very important. So hygiene, that is why we are saying, so hygiene is very important, right from the pasteurization of the compost, right from the pasteurization of the casing material, pasteurization of the room, hygiene of the people working in the spawn areas, working in the growing areas, working in the packing areas. They have to be healthy, they have to be medically checked frequently. So small percentage of infected compost can ultimately infect huge amount of compost. Use hand gloves and mask for the laborers. Train the laborers to use food deep. They need to sanitize their foods. They need to sanitize hands. They need to sanitize faces. They need to use the very clean sanitized clothes, dresses, uniforms while entering into the growing rooms or spawn tunnels. They should not use regular clothes when they are coming from their homes. They should not enter with those clothes. They should change the clothes, and then they should enter into these very high, delicate, clean environments. Sterilize the tools, knives, the knives and tools which we are using for the cutting and all this. They should be sterilized. Clean air socks. Socks means ducts. We need to clean the ducts. Otherwise, these ducts are also the areas where pathogens forms their homes. So we have to remove all the insecticides, bacteria, viral infections from the air handling units, fans, even the sensors. So we have to thoroughly clean, we have to maintain thorough hygiene, we have to train the people to maintain thorough hygiene. We need to make them understand the value or the importance of the hygiene on the impact of the yield or impact on the quality of the product. And all these things are very important if you are looking for the export market, because for export market you require to have some certification, and we have discussed about that in the video 1. We have discussed in very detail about certification requirement for the export. So if you want to get those certifications for your farm, you need to have the hygiene. And now you are seeing, because of the corona and all that viral infections, how things are changing, how the dynamics are changing. Now people will be more, in fact, educated, more attentive to the all these aspects, and they will be very choosy, they will be very selective, and even governments will be very much concerned about cleanliness in the farms, cleanliness in the restaurants, cleanliness all eating places, commercial places. So we have to ensure that even our farms are also safe, and we do not have any problem from the governments. That is also very important, because now dynamics is changing. People are creating, or they are having more awareness. People are understanding the impacts of the viral infections through the food, because corona has also come through the seafood or from the wild animals. So people will be very much careful. So we have to be very much careful when we are selling or growing or harvesting our products. So another important is the chicken manure. So chicken manure is used uh, in the compost. So when you are preparing the compost, we have to use the right quality of the chicken manure. So nitrogen content should be 3.5% to 4%. Higher the nitrogen is, then is the better for the yield. Moisture content should be 20 to 50%. Do not use dry chicken manure. Procure from the same source or the poultry which is producing disease free broilers. If there is gambora like diseases are there in the poultry, then we should not use the manure of that particular poultry, because the chicken manure has also to be disease free. It has to be free of all viral infections. Otherwise that viral infection will get spread into your farm, and then it will get into your button mushroom, and then it will enter into the people. So we have to be very careful, and this is not something complicated, it is very simple. Just we have to take right precautions at right level. So perform laboratory analysis of manure before the procurement. Blend well this chicken manure with straw and bagasse. So these are all the cares which we have to take to have a more success in this business. So proper planning of the growing area, we will talk in detail about this aspect in my next video, but again we are repeating some things here. So each square meter of area in the growing room add to the production. So we have to ensure that each and every square meter of area of your farm should generate the revenue, it should give the production. So that is very important. So you have to go and plan at such a macro level, because you have invested your hard earned money, hard borrowed money from the bank to create that square meter of area. So if you are not giving attention to each and every square meter of area, means you are professionally failed. I am using very bitter words, but this is the fact. People have to appreciate this. So x kg of yield per square meter, how much quantity of yield of button mushroom you are getting per square meter is a very important tool. In our countries people are getting the yield 12 kg to 16 kg, 18 kg. In overseas, in China, Ukraine, or in Canada, people are getting very high, 25 to even people have reached to 30, people have crossed even 30 kg of yield. So whatever that extra you get, 15-20 kg, is nothing but direct profit. So actual production per unit area shall not be less than your design value. So you have to utilize each and every corner of your growing room, and it will be get utilized when you are having a proper design, when you are having a proper planning. It does not mean that you have to put the shelves and racks and each and every space, available space, because if you do that, then you will also miserably fail. So we need to do a right trading off, we need to do the right optimization of your utilized space and unutilized space, because unutilized space or the gaps will provide or will help us to maintain right microclimate in the room. So cost of environment control, labor, compost, etc. are getting built up on each square meter area of the shelf. So we have to ensure that your all these costs are also very less. So having right technology mix, so you can do the atomization, you can do the some modernization of your farm, and you can reduce your number of labors in the farm. Or if you go for modern technology for handling the compost at a mega level, then even you can do so many tasks in less time with less labor. And many less labor means, if you have less labor means you have less chances of infection from the people. So that is another concern. So that is the reason people are going for the modernization in the developed countries, because the infections are now happening because of the labor. So if you have 50, 60, 100 people in the farm, then management of those number of people, taking care of the hygiene, monitoring their hygiene level is very difficult. So that is the reason people are going for the modernization. Then spacing between the shelf and the adjacent shelf, spacing between the shelf and wall, these are all very important. Because of that, because those gaps, those spacings are basically controlling your movement of air. So maximum bed per shelves means you will have no proper circulation of the air in the growing room. So you should have certain optimize number of shelves, optimize number of beds per shelves, then only you will get the right quality of the environment. Then you will have very tight control on the microclimate, and you can even vary the microclimate per phase, growth phase of your mushroom. Then to maintain humidity level, we have to maintain the floors wet. Floors wet means we should not create the ponds, there should not be accumulation of the water, it just be gently, we should make just gently wet. So we have to spray very little water every 5 to 6 hours, so that they will not get dried out, or they will not absorb the moisture from the air. And because of that, your humidity level of your growing rooms will not get impacted or change drastically, and then you will have a better control on the humidity. If your floorings is dry, then it will absorb the moisture from the room moisture or room air, and ultimately room air will absorb the moisture from your compost. So ultimately it will impact the moisture level in the compost. So that is the reason we have to keep on gently wetting the flooring. It does not mean that there should be formation of the pond, there should be proper slopes, there should not be accumulation of the water, there should be proper drainage system, there should not be any homes for the growth of the bacteria, infections, viral infections to happen. And this will give better control on the relative humidity level in the room, help to control the room temperature also. Avoid falling when you are spraying the water on the beds, bags, or the flooring. The water should not fall on the sensors, because sensors are very costly. We have to take a lot of care. Falling water on the bed, which will hamper the pinning. So water also should not fall on the pins on the button. There should be very gentle. There is a particular method is there for supplying the water to the crop. We have to apply that particular method. Then only water will not get deposited on the surface of the buds or the pins or on the caps of the button mushroom. This is a very important aspect, graze picking. We will again discuss maybe in the next video. So graze picking means we have to do the harvesting at a certain rate. Graze means when lamb is eating the grass in the field, it is grazing, it is eating at a certain rate. So we have to move further when you are picking the button mushroom at a certain speed. So graze picking gives the better yield of production. So graze picking creates more space around each mushroom. So mushroom grows 4% per hour, that we understand. That is, every 24 hours the size of the mushroom doubles. So we have to put the number of pickers per room per day, that we have to plan. So planning is very important. So we can discuss that in a detail. How many pickers should be there for each room, and at what speed the picker should move from one side of the shelf to the another side of the shelf. So he has to move at a certain speed. He should not pick each and every button mushroom. He should create a spaces. He should take only those sizes of the button mushroom. So he picks up only those selective sizes of the button mushroom, then he will create more spaces around other button mushroom. So by the time he will go at other end, he will pick from other shelves. Those mushrooms also will grow in 24 hours and they will reach to the right optimum size. So picking timing, picking speed, number of pickers per shelf, per room are very important aspect. And this is again has a scientific impact on the yield and the production, the weight of the button mushroom. So pick every day till 4 p.m. so you get better yield. Do not pick after 4 p.m. You start picking at a certain time in the morning. Ask pickers to spend 15 minutes per bed for harvesting. So you give them that they should do the harvesting, they should do the cultivation, they should do the cutting only in 15 minutes. So whatever they do in 15 minutes, they should do in 15 minutes. So if there are suppose 6 beds are there, then in 90 minutes they should complete the picking of entire one shelf. If they are spending more than that, means they are either collecting very small button mushrooms. So we have to collect the mushrooms of right size. So if you are spending more than 90 minutes, means you are allowing them to pick lower size button mushrooms. So right optimization of right timing is very important. So every 90 minutes pickers come to the same bed. So suppose you have 6 shelves or you have 4 shelves, so only 4 pickers are required. And this will give the better control on the harvested size of the mushroom. Otherwise you will see that in the packet you will see the very big mushrooms, even 60-70 mm sizes, and even you see the sizes of 30 mm 40 mm sizes in the same pack. So you will not have the uniform size and it will not then look good in the packet. So if you want to have the optimum weight, optimum size, and you want to get better rate for your mushroom, we need to have graze picking. So this is something art which we can develop among the pickers through a training. Then storage of the fresh mushrooms. So we should keep these mushrooms in right quality clean crates at a temperature 3 degree to 4 degree centigrade. This temperature should be thoroughly monitored, controlled. Humidity level should be monitored. If you are not monitoring the humidity, if your air handling unit is not designed in a proper way, if the surface area of the coil in the air handling unit is a very small, then you will see the loss of weight, because this coil in the air handling unit will absorb the water from these harvested mushrooms, and then you will lose the weight. You are losing the weight means you are losing that much kg of money. We are losing that much kg of price of the button mushroom. So we should have the right humidity. Your coils should not absorb the moisture from the product source stored in the rooms. So you can see this anti-room for the storage areas. So these are basically the storage areas. These storage areas are not directly open to the outside. So this is just in between space between outside air and storage air. That is called anti-room. So it is just like a partition room. So that also has to be maintained at a certain temperature. There should be certain cleanliness. You can see how this flooring has done, how this side their tiles are fitted, skirting, then it should be washable. This flooring should be washable, the door should be washable, the ceiling should be washable, the air handling unit should be accessible for the cleaning, light level should be proper. So if you take care all of this, then your farm will look very professional. Then the buyers from the overseas market will appreciate your product. They will be enthusiastic to buy your products, and you will be feeling very proud while showing the photos of your farm if you are exhibiting your button mushrooms in overseas exhibitions like Gulf food exhibitions, or there are many other exhibitions are there. You can show the photos, you can display the photos, you can show the videos of your farm in those, so that people will appreciate the level of design, the level of quality, level of cleanliness, level of management, level of your experience in the cultivation, and people will then buy your product, and people will give the repeated orders to your farm, and then you will see positive impact of that into your growth of your business. So so far we have discussed in detail in the video 3 about the spawn mixing process, then we have discussed about the casing, then we have discussed about the peeling phase and also we have discussed more about the harvesting of the button mushroom, cleanliness standard requirements, and so many things, so many aspects in very much detail. If you have any inquiries, any queries, if you have any doubts, you can post at the bottom of this video, or you can send on my WhatsApp number, which is displayed at the bottom of this video, and we can keep on interacting, we can keep people educating, and we can ensure the success of the people. See you next time in the next video on the button mushroom farming.